The lights went out and I had that momentary confusion and panic, as though I had suddenly gone blind, but I recovered in an instant. It was just a power outage. It was common enough in our suburban setting. My father had moved my mother and my 3-year-old self here after he had built his dream house, much to my mother's annoyance, because the move had taken her away from her budding career in the city and cut her off from her family. She was then forced to become a housewife while my father, now free from her supervision, was free to pursue his various love interests in the city. But my mother knew of the various women and became depressed. Her depression deepened with each new evidence of his infidelity that she found, and not being near her family and friends who were banned from visiting the house, the depression soon manifested as chest pains and headaches. She began to be weak and frail and her beauty quickly faded. She adored my father, but he thought that she married him for his money because of the 30-year age gap between them. She was 25 when they married. Everyone including him called her a trophy wife because although she was very beautiful, her family was poor and had practically sold her in exchange for the cancellation of their debts. What no one considered is that her gratitude overcame any repulsion she may have felt towards him and she loved him dearly. The few years they had spent in the city before moving to the suburbs had not been easy, but she had started a career and kept herself too busy to bother about his extramarital affairs. But he resented her for her job and her little salary, which meant that she was no longer as dependent on him as before, so he forced her to stop working. The last straw came 2 years after we moved. I had just started school, and my mom, after dropping me off at school, had gone shopping to while away time before she had to pick me up again. When we got home, my father, who was supposed to be on a trip, was sitting in the living room and cuddling with a woman at least 5 years younger than my mother. Playing in the corner with my toys was a 3-year-old girl in a pretty blue and pink dress just like the one my father had given me on my 5th birthday. "Aram Yafet," she exclaimed, her face turning a terrible shade. My father casually pushed the woman off his lap and addressed my mother. You are back. Meet Carol. My concubine. Congratulate her, she is carrying my son. And make up the spare room for her because she is moving in immediately." This cruel speech shocked my mother, who clutched at her chest and bent over in pain. She fell to the ground and never got up again. She died right there in front of us. The doctors called it severe broken heart syndrome. Fast forward 13 years, and my father was now retired and living off his pension and investments in stocks and shares. His investments were good and he was as wealthy as ever, except that his money did come with the regularity of a salary anymore. He was old and ill, all thanks to the effects of his hedonistic lifestyle and the trouble that his new wife and daughter had brought him. That was only my opinion, however, because according to him, I was the source of all his troubles. I had been reduced to the position of an orphan in the house, like a Cinderella character. My sister, 2 years younger than me, and her mother hated me because I was a spitting image of my mother, because my, in quote, evil eye, had caused her to miscarry, and because my father had grown a conscience when she died, and regretted being the cause of her death. His conscience and his fear of sudden death had made him write his will, leaving everything he owned equally to me, Carol, and his other daughter Noel. Carol had found the will and become jealous because she did not want the money divided in 3, but in 2 so that she could get a larger share. This was the start of all my troubles. She started by pretending to care for me, but then she started changing the grades on my test and exam results to make it seem like I was failing at school. I had been kept back twice before I was old enough and wise enough to realize what she was doing, and I learned to hide my real result sheets and present them to my father before she had an opportunity to find them. Then her little pinches and harsh words became beatings at the slightest assumed misbehavior or error. But she used blunt articles on my back and thighs so that I would not bleed, and the bruises would be hidden under my clothes. When I tried to report her to my father, she made such a fuss and threatened to take herself off to meet his first wife, that he was afraid of ever raising the matter again. Then she manipulated him into thinking that I was a liar and had a bad character. He made a choice to believe this and, since he was too old to bother about a child, he left me to her care. Noel, meanwhile, constantly tore my clothes, stole my books in order to make me look clumsy and careless. My father responded by spending less on me so that I was forced to buy cheap clothes, while she was dressed in the highest fashion. I began to look ugly and unkempt due to the physical and emotional distress I suffered over the years. Her bullying extended to our school where, thanks to her mother, we were now in the same class. She spread the rumor that I was the daughter of a mistress, and I often received the disdain of not just my classmates, but even their parents, who instructed their children to stay away from me. By now we were in our final term of high school and preparing for the final exams. She still stinks, my classmates would say as I passed by. After all these years. Of course Noel would reply. She is almost an imbecile. She does not know how to keep herself clean. Yes, but it has been so many years and she is coming from your house. Don't you smell her? You know we don't walk together, and my mom does not allow the bastard of a mistress into her car. They laughed. Only Noel, Carol, and I knew that one of Noel's tricks was to hide dirty socks, rotten eggs, etc. in my drawers every now and then, and I did not always find them quickly enough to re-wash my clothes to get the stench out. Hey! Look, Brian is coming over. Brian was the most handsome boy in our set, tall, lean, with that confident slouch. He excelled at basketball, and his parents were rich. He had dyed his hair blonde because he was a part-time model, so his parents had gotten him special permission. He also had a reputation of being a heartbreaker, but that did not stop girls from falling for him. There had been a rumor about him and a girl from a junior class last year, but the rumor had suddenly gone away and the girl had apparently been transferred to a different state. Every girl wanted Brian, and it looked like Noel was determined to conquer him. She turned and looked, then cutting her eyes at him, she tossed her head and looked away, pretending that she did not care. Look, he is coming right over. Noel tossed her hair over her shoulder when he called her name. Give us some privacy, girls, she said to her friends, and they scattered. Brian spoke in a stage whisper, loud enough for everyone to hear, while pretending like his words were for her ears only. Your sister is looking so pretty. Sometimes I think she is even prettier than you, he said, looking at me where I sat at my desk. Won't you introduce her to me? He was teasing, but Noel did not like to be compared to me. If you like stinky girls, then go and introduce yourself to her, she said. I have no time for people beneath me. Brian smiled a teasing smile. He lowered his voice. I hear she is a virgin. So? That just means that boys are afraid she will give them some disease. Brian let his fingers brush against hers. And what about you, are you a virgin? He whispered. She tossed her head angrily and flicked her hair over her shoulder. Wouldn't you like to find out? She snapped and walked off, but as she did, she glanced back and gave him a flirtatious look. Once a week we had craft and hobby class, and each student was expected to gather in the large workshop divided into areas for various crafts like carpentry, calligraphy, candle making, etc. I was in the candle making class and Brian was in carpentry, which was the next class. Noel took calligraphy because, as she said, she was the daughter of a rich family and should indulge herself in something sophisticated. I caught Brian looking over at me several times during the class, and was disgusted when, after catching my eyes, he would make lecherous gestures at me. I ignored him as best I could, as I ignored the derisive laughter of his sidekicks until both our instructors shut them up and Brian was sent off to the instructor in charge of discipline. Noel, I know, watched the entire proceeding with anger and jealousy flashing in her eyes, and I knew that I would pay dearly for my perceived infraction. I bore the abuse of my classmates, my teachers and my parents, and I bided my time, knowing that high school would soon be over and university would set me free. I consoled myself with plans to go and never come home again. Another consolation was in candle making because the scents helped create an atmosphere of serenity in my turmoil. I would light them in my room and pretend that I was someone else. However, I always took care to snuff them out before I went to bed. This was one of the lessons instilled in us by our craft teacher. Another lesson was to always keep the lit candle on a wide ceramic base made specially for that purpose, and to keep flammable things away from it. So when I was shocked into wakefulness by a bucket of water poured on me, and I saw my room full of smoke and Noel, in her frilly princess nightdress, shouting and calling for help, I knew instantly, even before my mind had quite grasped what was going on, that Noel was taking her revenge. Moments later, my parents ran into my room where Noel was crying hysterically and I was sitting drenched and dazed in bed. What is going on? My father cried, putting on the light and surveying the situation, horrified. Was there a fire? Jillian, what have you done? Demanded Carol, frightened by the mess she saw. I looked at her face and realized that Noel had not told her of her plan. Maybe it was a spur-of-the-moment decision, Noel ran to her mother and began to explain how she had been reading when she heard a strange sound in my room next door, and being curious, she had opened the door to see my bedside table already in flames thanks to the candle that I had carelessly placed having fallen over. She had then poured water over the fire and begun to shout. No one questioned where she got the bucket, and how she had had time to run and fill it with water without raising the alarm. No one asked me if I had even lit a candle that night. As it turned out, I had not, but 13 years had taught me not to even bother defending myself against either Noel or Carol. "Jillian, you will be the death of me," my father shouted at me, and taking a belt from the hook just by my mirror, he began to whip me with it. It was not often he whipped me, and he was even too frail to do it now, and he was forced to stop after 2 or 3 blows. Carol herself was too shaken to assist him. She kept looking at Noel with fear and disapproval. A fire was too uncontrollable a risk to have taken. She might have burned down the entire house by accident. They left my room together, and I was left to clean up the mess and find somewhere else to sleep that night since my bed was soaked and my room stank of the acrid smoke. The following day, my father punished me, but the punishment was not what Noel expected. He threw me as far out of the house as he could. In other words, I was sent to the servants' quarters, which was a room at the back of the house that adjoined it, but did not open into it. Its door opened into the yard. This last punishment was very heavy to me since I had no family, not even the appearance of one, and the servants were under strict instruction not to fraternize with me. I was lonely. But for Noel it was a bad miscalculation, because I was free from supervision of the elders of the family, while she, with her room inside, and being an angel child, was strictly watched over by her parents. She was furious and begged to be given the room instead of me, but her parents would not hear of it. Graduation finally came and the school organized a series of events for the students that ended in the evening. Most students, including Noel, had their family organize transport for them, while a few like me walked home on foot. My father had built his house near the top of a hill and had planted fruit trees below, so that it felt like a little forest leading up to the gate. There was a low fence surrounding the property, but that did not stop the odd vagabond from attempting to use the lonely location for nefarious activities before he was chased away by our servants. I had almost reached home. I was now on our own property walking by the trees when I heard a noise just behind me. From the corner of my eye, I saw a figure jump out of the tree line just as I passed by, and before I could react, he covered my nose and mouth with a cloth. I smelled and tasted something strange and slightly sweet, and I passed into unconsciousness. When I woke up later, Noel and her parents were standing over me. I felt as if my head was splitting in two. It hurt so much that I could hardly see at first, and there was the strong, bitter taste of alcohol in my mouth and all about me. My father was speaking loudly, practically shouting insults at me. I felt as if I would pass out again because the loudness of his voice was making the pain in my head even worse. "Stop, Daddy, please be quiet," I said, raising my voice into a yell to drown him out, and reaching out my hand defensively as if I could physically stop the sound. He stopped in shock, then his face turned purple with rage and he raised his wooden walking stick, the one with the silver orb, and began to beat me with it. I wailed in pain as the blows struck. I felt as though he was breaking my bones. I thought honestly that I would die, it was so overwhelming. Luckily the servants had gathered by this time and they took hold of him and pulled him away from me. "Stop, sir, you'll kill her. Let me kill her, let me kill off this disgrace from my family. Let her die like her mother." "You killed her mother, will you kill her too?" I wondered who it was that was defending me so boldly and without fear of being sacked as I slipped into unconsciousness again. But it didn't last long. I woke a few minutes to the feeling of being lifted. I panicked. Be still," said a man's voice. He did not need to say so, because the effort brought so much pain to my head that I passed out again, and this time when I woke up I was lying in a hospital bed with a bandage around my head and an IV in my hand. A nurse came over. "You are awake, how do you feel? Does your head still hurt?" "No, I'm fine. I just feel dazed." "Yes, you have a bad concussion, you had a very big bump at the back of your head. It looks like you fell very hard. At first we thought you were drunk because you were covered in alcohol and your breath was smelling of it, so we did a blood test, but according to the results you didn't have any alcohol in your system at all. Someone must have framed you." "Yes," I replied, "and I know who did, but there is nothing I can do about it." As for your other wounds, it seems that you were also attacked with a weapon. You have bruises all over your arms and back. Here the nurse stopped and said carefully, looking away from me. You say you know who did this, do you want us to call the police? I considered for only half a second. How could I report this matter to the police? This was the only family I had. If I put them in jail, then how would I face myself? Who would I go to? My mother's family had sold her and relinquished any and all responsibility towards her and me, even when she was alive. I had tried to make contact before and been rebuffed. If I told the police what had happened, how Noel had framed me, and my father had beaten me, I would be putting my only family in jail. No. I actually have no proof. I would rather not involve the police. The nurse looked relieved. After all, the Yaphet family was one of the biggest in the area, and no one wanted to be entangled with them, especially over a family matter. Later on, I received a visit from Miss Maddie, one of my father's oldest servants. She was the one who had saved me from my father, and he had sacked her, as I feared he would. She was my only visitor, coming to see me every day and bringing me food and caring for my bruised body until I was discharged 3 days after that fateful night. She took me home in her old car and dropped me off at the gate. My family knew that I was coming home, and they were waiting for me in the living room. "Good evening, Daddy," I greeted my father, when I saw him. I saw the anger still in his eyes, and I knew that he would not be interested in hearing my side of whatever story Carol and Noel had fed him. "Every evening has been cursed since your mother died and burdened me with you," he replied cruelly. "I knew you were a dunce and a fool, but I never knew that you were a whore. You have disgraced the family name by bringing men to my own house. Who were they? Who did you sleep with under my roof? Tell me," he ordered. This was the first time I was hearing of the matter, but it explained why he had been so angry before. I kept silent, both in confusion and because there was no point defending myself. What was the point of telling him that I was innocent? Had my pleas, or any of my tears, softened him towards me in all the years since Carol came into the house? I did not bother anymore and resigned myself to my fate, whatever it would be. After all, I had gotten admitted into college, and even if he cast me out, I would manage to fend for myself. "She will not answer," Carol said. "And even if she does, how can we be sure that it will be the truth?" Noel spoke up. "I have been hearing rumors about her in school, that she has been selling herself, but I did not want to tell you guys because I could not prove it. I never knew that she would become drunk and sleep with someone in the house and even pass out. What a disgrace! How will I face my classmates again? How will I ever find a good man to marry, if my sister is a whore?" "Don't worry about that," my father said. "She will not stay under my roof for a single hour more. I have married her off to Maddie's son." Noel's face showed that this was news to her. "Are you talking about Jeremy? That fool?" "Yes. I cannot offer her to a respectable family since she has proved that she has no respect for herself. I even had to pay a lot of money for Maddie to take her." So that was to be my fate? To be married off without my consent? But in our culture, a father was allowed to do that, and the way I felt at that moment, anything was better than staying in that house. Luckily, I had not been tampered with, but I could have been. Maybe Noel had lost her nerve, maybe she had calculated that if I could prove that I was not drunk, then reported to the police, it would have been traced back to her. Maybe she had just not been able to find a man willing to go that far. I knew that I had been saved by the skin of my teeth, and I decided that staying with Maddie and her son in the name of marriage would be better than living here, and if it was not, I would run away. Jeremy was known in the community as the village idiot. He had failed out of college after barely graduating high school, and returned to his mother's house, hardly ever going out, except to run errands for her every now and then. And when he did, he always looked so unkempt, people would laugh at him. He was either a fool or mentally retarded, according to the rumors about him. This was the person my father had seen it fit to offer me to. I did not answer a word. "Do you not even have the decency to apologize for your behavior?" Carol said. "I blame you for this," said my father, turning to her. "I left her to you to raise. You cannot blame me for her bad genes." She was swift to defend herself. I turned away and walked out of the house and round the back into my room. I found my clothes already packed in 2 bin bags. I did a quick search and found that my candles and anything else I had of value was gone, probably appropriated by Noel. I picked up the bags and made my way back to the gate, Prepared to walk to Maddie's house. She had given me her address while in hospital. It was on the other side of town, but not difficult to find. I didn't have to find my way. Maddie was still parked at the gate. "Come in," she said kindly. "After what you went through, there is no way I will let you walk down this road alone anymore." I was numb. "You bought me?" I asked her as we drove into town. "No, but I was paid a good dowry for you. It looks like your stepmother was determined to disgrace you as much as possible, so she agreed to the dowry," I said. "It is enough to cover your upkeep while you are in college. And don't worry about the marriage matter. Just stay with us as a guest so you have a home, and when you are ready, you can divorce my son and move on with your life." Tears began to roll down my face. I was so grateful for her kindness. It turns out that she had been a servant when my mother was alive, and she knew the entire history. My father paid well, so although she had watched the injustice being done to me, she had never spoken up since I was not actually badly physically harmed. But when she saw my father beat me that night, she had become fed up and knew that she could not keep silent anymore. Although she had lost her job, at least she had delivered me. Surprisingly, life at Ms. Mandy's home was not less comfortable than it was back home at my father's mansion. Although nothing was designer, and it was not beautifully decorated, it had the feel of a home. It was cozy. The house was an old-fashioned design with a fenced-in courtyard. Ms. Mandy had planted colorful wildflowers all along the inside of the fence. The house itself was well kept. There was evidence of a recent renovation with a new roof and fresh white paint. Inside, the two mismatched sofas were soft and comfortable. The upholstery was quality without being brand name. Nothing was broken or dilapidated. The doors, the windows, the tables, the lamps, not even the carpet was worn, although nothing was new. It seemed as though Ms. Mandy had a good eye for buying used furniture, and an even better eye for interior decoration, because the overall effect was cozy. There were 3 rooms, one for Ms. Mandy, one for Jeremy, her idiot son who I was yet to meet despite the fact that I had been there almost 3 hours already, and she assured me that he was home, and the third, the smallest room, was mine. "You say he is around?" I asked Ms. Mandy. I was nervous. I hoped that whoever this man was that my father had married me to, he would not be in a hurry to claim any rights. I intended to divorce him quietly, then go off to school as soon as possible, find a job and take care of myself, leaving the dowry my father had paid to Ms. Mandy as thanks for saving me. "Yes. But he mostly works at night, so he really sleeps a lot during the day. Sometimes I don't even see him at all for 2 or 3 days." Ms. Maddie gave me a nervous look. "There is something I have not told you," she said. "I did not tell him that I married him a wife." My heart jumped into my chest, as visions of more drama rushed into my mind. She saw my face and hurried to reassure me. "Don't worry, I told him that I vowed find him a wife, and he did not disagree. I just didn't tell him that I have actually found one. You see, I haven't spoken to him since I stopped working for your father, so he does not know what has been going on." "Why?" I asked anxiously. "Is there anything wrong with him?" "No, he is perfectly all right. There is nothing wrong with him at all. He is just very busy, that's all." After she served me dinner, I saw her put some food away on the counter and make a flask of coffee which she put beside it. I guessed it was for Jeremy. After the plates had been washed and we had chatted for a while concerning my past, my pains and my plans for the future, she bid me good night. My bed was warm and comfortable, but it was strange, and my body was still painful from the beating I had received. So I tossed and turned practically the entire night long and eventually got up at about 5 a.m. The sun was already beginning to rise at that time of the year. I let myself out of the house to use the old-fashioned outhouse. I must have been very sleepy on my way there, because it was only on my way back that I noticed a man dozing in the yard. He was leaning back in an easy wicket chair, perhaps trying to catch the early morning sun, with a baggy pair of old trousers hiked high up on his legs and his unbuttoned flannel shirt hanging like old, out-of-date curtains by his sides. The sun was shining on his little pot belly and chubby cheeks, but he was not bad-looking, and neither did he look like an idiot. He must have felt my eyes on him, because his eyes opened and he noticed me on the veranda that surrounded the house. He stood quickly, at the same time putting on the black-rimmed glasses he had in his hand. His baggy trousers covered his legs and the old shirt draped over his pot belly. The transformation was instant, He became Jeremy the idiot again so suddenly that when he demanded who I was, I mindlessly, and with slight revulsion, answered, "I'm your wife." Before I knew what I was saying. His eyes went wide and he stared at me, blinking behind his thick lens. I mean, I stammered, not even knowing how to correct the impression I had given. I fled to my room. Later that morning, when I heard Ms. Mandy in the kitchen, I went out to help her. "Hello, dear," she greeted me. "I'm sorry, Jeremy must have surprised you. He works at night, so he is usually awake early in the morning. And he goes outside to get some sun before he goes to bed." "He's like a vampire," I said. "Yes." Ms. Mandy laughed. "Or an owl." "What does he do?" "I'm not really sure," she said. "But I know it is not illegal. He works on his computer, and he hardly has time to socialize. But he makes enough money to take good care of me. He changed most of my furniture only recently." I was surprised to hear this. He did not sound like the idiot the children called him. "Do you know what people call him in town?" "Yes. And it hurts. But I think they just don't understand him. Jeremy is a genius. I had to push him to finish high school because he was so ahead of his teachers. He was so ahead with his reading that he was correcting his teachers and getting into trouble. Eventually he lost interest and barely graduated. Then he went off to university and could not continue there either. He was just too advanced. So he dropped out and started a company. Do you know he has hired 2 of his former professors? And he ended up getting his degree over the internet from a foreign university." I couldn't say a word for surprise. Jeremy the idiot was actually Jeremy the genius. For the first time since I was a child, as I listened to Ms. Mandy, I felt a real bubble of laughter start at the bottom of my stomach. I could hardly contain it. Ms. Mandy laughed with me for a while, but then when she saw how hysterical I was, she started to shush me and got me a glass of water. "I'm sorry," I said at last. "I just realized that Noel's plan has backfired very badly. She planned to destroy me and she failed miserably. I would like to see her face when she realizes her mistake. My husband," I made air quotes, "is actually a genius." Graduation had taken place as school was going on summer vacation in July, so I had more than 2 months before the first semester at university would begin. I spent the time really getting to know Ms. Mandy and a little of her son. I was shy, not because of nature, but by my difficult upbringing, so it did not take too much time before I was able to throw off my reticence and place Ms. Mandy in the place of my own mother. She was the kindest, loveliest person I had known since my mother died, and I didn't even remember my mother's face anymore. Her sack from my father's house never affected her because whatever Jeremy was doing brought in enough money to take care of the household needs, and she said, as a matter of fact, that there was more money to spend now that I was here. She called me a good luck charm both for herself and for her son. However, she never forced me into the role of a daughter-in-law, and when September came, she used my dowry to pay my fees in advance for all 4 years of university. I was there 2 years before I ever saw Noel. It was at the beginning of 3rd year and I had an elective course. I was working part-time at the school cafeteria and library to pay for my upkeep because I did not want to take any more money from Ms. Mandy and Jeremy. I still had it in mind to divorce him, though I still used their home as a base during the holidays. In 2 years I had seen nothing of my father and his family, and since we did not move in the same circles, I had not heard anything about them either. I knew that Carol's dream for Noel was for her to be a lawyer, and since I was studying accounting, we were on different sides of the campus. Even the cafeteria where I worked was off campus on this side of the school, and I worked at the general library, not at the law library. It is not surprising that we never met. In my 3rd year, however, one of the electives for my course was law, so I had to go over to the law campus for a few classes a week. The first time I went, I met Noel in class. I was late, having had to run from one of my jobs, and the lecturer was already in class. I stood breathless at the door waiting for his permission to enter. He was irritated and waved me in. "Why are you late?" he queried. "I had to work, sir," I answered, bowing. "I ran directly from my job." He hesitated, not wanting to harass me since I had a good excuse, but he did not want to appear weak in front of his students at this first lecture of the semester. Then I heard my name called very loud in the sharp needling voice I instantly recognized. I looked up into the seats and spotted Noel immediately. She was sitting somewhere in the middle of the hall, her hair now bleached blonde and looking unnatural, and surrounded by girls dressed just as she was with too much cleavage and too much makeup. She looked a lot older than me, and I was 2 years her senior. "Jillian, you have not changed," she shouted down. Then to the professor she said, "Jillian has always been careless and dumb, sir. She is a bit retarded, please don't mind her." The professor looked with distaste at her, irritated that she was raising her voice like this in class. I was also surprised. I thought it was very bold and ill-bred of her. After all, this was university, a much larger class than high school. "Mind your business," he said to her, and waved me into the class. "I'm just trying to warn you, sir, I've known Jillian since high school and this is exactly how she was. She used to get flogged by teachers for being late and dirty all the time." I said, "Mind your business, unless you want to leave the class?" Answered the professor, "It's your business if you want to condone her behavior. I'm just surprised that she made it into university. The last I heard, she was married to some retarded fool. Maybe she has to work to feed him." "Get out of my class," the professor said. Noel got up slowly, revealing her very short skirt and black tights, and walked mincingly down the steps and out the class, cutting her eyes at me as she did. I knew that her words were designed to hurt me, but more than 2 years away from her and her mother's toxic presence had healed my oppressed soul and taken it far out of their reach. I could not be harmed by her vindictiveness anymore. She was waiting for me after the lecture. She began to mock me as her girlfriends surrounded her. "Cheap, cheap, cheap," she said, looking at my t-shirt, baggy bib overalls rolled up at the hem and tennis shoes. "Isn't Jeremy taking care of you? Are you so poor that you have to work? Why did you even come to school? And where is Jeremy anyway? I'm surprised that you have time from wiping his drool to come to university." "No, let me go. I have another class," I said, my back against the wall. My heart beating with adrenaline. I had known that this day would eventually come and I had wondered how I would address her. Would I be dismissive? Would I dignify her with an answer? "What lecture?" she said, mocking. "Are you sure you are not going off to work at some dump?" I looked at her again and smiled. "Little sister," I began. "Time has not taught you respect." Her friends who had been sniggering were surprised. "Little sister? Are you her older sister?" "Yes, I am. It is such a pity that she looks like my aunt instead of the cute little girl that she used to be. Time has obviously been rough on her." Noel was infuriated, but before she could speak I pushed past her. "Be careful how address me from now on, little sister," I said to her over my shoulder. "I fear no one now." And I walked off. She did not speak to me after that, but rumors began to spread about me around the class, then around the campus. It was obvious who started the rumors because they were simply the retelling of past traumas. I was retarded, I was a whore, I was married to an idiot, I had to be kicked out of my father's house for my whoredom, and I had even been kicked out of my husband's house. I paid no attention to them. I had my work and my studies to attend to. I simply did not have the time even to think about it. But the next semester, it was the law students that came over to my campus to take elective accounting courses. So Noel was still in my class? As she did before, she was careful not to speak to me in class, but the rumors began to spread again on my campus among people that I studied and worked with. Although few people here believed the rumors, there were those who did and began to call for my resignation from the cafeteria and library. Luckily, I had signed a contract to work for the semester so I could not be fired. For my final year, though, there was no guarantee that my position would be renewed. I went home at the end of that session to spend 2 weeks at Ms. Mandy's. It was a pleasure to be back, and we had a lot to say to each other. "Jeremy has moved out," she said, almost as soon as I stepped into the house. I still had hardly ever seen my husband in name in the 3 years since I had considered this my home. I knew what he looked like, but I hardly heard his voice and never interacted with him. But I had come to accept him as an eccentric part of the family, and I respected him because when we did meet in the early mornings, or if I stayed up late, he never came on to me or demanded his rights in any way. He was always shy around me, hardly meeting my eyes, although I caught him staring at me a few times when he thought I could not see him. I was strangely sad to hear that he was not in the house. His mom used to leave notes for him at night, usually chores and information that he needed to do and know. I had also began to leave friendly notes, just to be friendly. I would also leave presents and snacks, and sometimes he would leave me a thank you note in response. I was surprised to find myself missing him. I told him Mandy my misadventure with Noel. You have not heard. A lot has happened since you were here last, she said. I became tense at the tone of her voice, but I did not want to care. I did not answer. Your father is very ill. Things have become very tough for the family. She went on when I did not answer. It turns out that your stepmother has been stealing from him all these years and squandering the money on other men. As a matter of fact, not long after you were sent away, Noel took over your room. She convinced your father that she was better behaved than you, and with her mother's support, she got her way. The servants say that she began to do everything she accused you of doing. Particularly, she would bring a blonde boy over. They say she wanted to marry him, so she tried to trap him by getting pregnant, but his parents made a big fuss because he was not the only boy she brought over to the room. He is a model now in the capital, and if she tries to accuse him of getting her pregnant, his lawyers will sue her for defamation of character. Then she lost the baby, but even that story is not straightforward. Your father was so upset that he became sick and was hospitalized for a long time. While he was there, he discovered that Noel is not his child. Apparently, your stepmother has been using his money to keep a lover for years. She stopped to look at me, expecting a reaction. I kept my eyes on the kettle on the stove, waiting to make a cup of tea. When she got no answer, she went on. Your stepmother used up all his money, and sold the house while he was in hospital without his knowledge. She looked at me again, hoping for a response. I was silent for a long time. Finally, I spoke. Where is he now? He donated a wing to the hospital when he still had money, so the hospital director agreed to keep him there in hospice care. They are saying he may not have very long to live. I hated my father. He had been the hand that caused my mother's death, and he had never protected me from his new wife, rather he had joined her in abusing me terribly, and had ended by throwing me out and marrying me off to what he thought was the worst person in the community. But he was my father after all. If nothing else, my mother had loved him, even through his betrayal. The next day, with much internal struggle, I went to the hospital to see him. He was not the same man I had left. He looked almost like a corpse already, with his extremely pale skin with blue veins showing through. He was so weak that he could hardly even lift his hand to acknowledge my presence, but he made a big attempt that ended in him choking and struggling to breathe. I rushed to his side out of pure humanity when I saw him struggle. Not even his weakened state softened my heart. He took my hand as I tried to get him to lay down quietly, and held it tight with what strength he had left, his weak, watery eyes fixed on my face. The nurse tried to get me to leave at last, but he would not let go, and eventually she relented. No one has been here to see him for weeks. What is actually the matter with him? I asked. It's the shock. He can't eat, he can't relieve himself, he is barely awake. This is the most active I have seen him since. You know. She tapered off. It's okay. I understand. I will stay with him. At this, my father's eyes closed, and tears began to run down his face into his ears. I pulled out my hanky and wiped them away as they fell, talking to him soothingly. Maybe one day I would forgive him, but for now I could at least show him kindness he never showed me. A few hours later, the nurse arrived with a colleague and, excusing me, fed him a liquid via a tube, and then turned him over to his side. My father's eyes were closed through all this. After they were done, they went away, and I resumed my seat and held his hand again. This time I was the one doing the holding. It felt strange, I could not remember ever holding his hand before this time. He opened his eyes and looked at me, he looked desperate, as though he was trying to say something but couldn't. I smiled gently at him. Sleep, Daddy. Rest. I'm here, it's okay. His face relaxed and his eyes closed. They never opened again. I went home after speaking to the doctor. I was his only known relative, and I authorized him to handle everything. His burial would have to be simple. There was simply no money for anything more elaborate. He didn't even have burial insurance. At least I could help ensure he did not have a pauper's burial, but that was the best I could do. I was glad that I at least had the opportunity to see him before he died. Mandy said he probably waited for me to apologize for everything. I stayed until September and went back when school resumed. I met Noel at the cafeteria where I had worked. They had not renewed my contract because of the rumors Noel had spread the year before. "I heard the old man died," she said, sitting down at my table where I was eating lunch. I looked at her. She looked sad. She could hardly lift her eyes to mine. I empathized with her. Her mother must have deceived her too. My father was the only father she had ever known, and now he was dead, and she could not even attend the funeral. I had not forgiven her yet, but perhaps I could one day, but not that day. She and her mother were the hands that had hurried him to his death. But then she lifted her head, took a deep breath and tossed her hair over her shoulder. "What a pity," she said. "Yeah, what a pity," I said. "Pity that you and your mother stole all his money and abandoned him in hospital when he became sick." She looked around, hoping no one had heard. "You bastard," she hissed, but I cut her off. "You are the bastard. Do you even know who your father is? And where is your Brian? Where is your baby? I know your whole story, Noel, and I'm not impressed." I was on the attack. I was finally on the attack. She should have known better than to come and see me just as I buried my father. At least I'm free, I'm not married to a retard. Jeremy is not a retard. He is a genius, I said with a triumphant smile. You made a mistake there. It is my good fortune to be married to him. She scoffed. If he is such a genius, then why have you been working? Why is he not taking care of you? You liar. The cafeteria was quiet during our exchange, only our raised voices could be heard as we quarreled, she laughing at my marriage situation, and me defending Miss Mandy and Jeremy. Then, as if on cue, as if our words had conjured him up, Jeremy walked in. I was surprised to see him. He was dressed in a well-cut navy blue suit, his hair was properly trimmed, he had exchanged his thick-rimmed glasses for something fashionable, and he looked like he had been working out. His muscles were defined even under the suit. He looked like he had stepped out of the cover of a magazine. I hardly recognized him, and when he smiled at me, my heart flipped. I blushed. Noel had her back to the door and did not see him walk in. But seeing my reaction, and hearing the giggles of the girls around, she turned around, her curiosity overcoming her vehemence. She was immediately captivated. He was looking at me, over Noel's shoulder, so maybe she thought he was smiling at her. She smiled and adjusted her clothes, tugging the tight dress down so that the cleavage was more pronounced. She batted her eyelids and gave him a wanton smile calculated to attract a man's attention. It did catch his attention, but he looked disgusted. He walked over to us and she moved up and stopped him in his path. "Hi," she said in a sunny voice. "Are you new here? You look familiar. Have we met before?" "Noel," I said, stepping forward. "Let me introduce you to Jeremy." Noel's mouth dropped open. "Jeremy? Which Jeremy?" He spoke for the first time. His voice deep and authoritative. "Jeremy, Jillian's husband." He reached for my hand, I gave it to him and he smiled again. My heart flipped again. "I'm sorry I could not attend your father's funeral. It was over before I even knew he had passed." "That's okay," I said. "It happened so suddenly. I buried him in the hospital cemetery. There was no real ceremony. I wish I could have been there. It must have been difficult for you." He was talking to me, looking deep into my eyes and expressing such care, I felt like I belonged to him. It was a good feeling. It was like we were in our own world in the midst of the chaos of the cafeteria, until Noel interrupted us. Her voice was desperate, despairing. "Are you Mandy's son? Are you that Jeremy?" Jeremy bent and kissed me suddenly, lightly on the cheek. "Let's go home. I just bought a house in town. I need you to decorate it if it's okay with you." So I moved in with Jeremy during my last year of university. After graduation we started our family. I heard later through Miss Mandy that Carol's boyfriend had cast her out since she was no longer a cash cow and she was homeless. As for Noel, by the time she finished university she was a wasted woman with a bad reputation that would be difficult to wash away. She tried to reach out to me and Jeremy, but we would not be deceived by her. The end.